Hello everyone, how's it going? My name is Elias, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will be talking about all the books I have recently read in the past couple of months. So if you have been keeping up with my channel and my videos, you can sort of guess which books I'll be talking about because I have briefly mentioned them in previous videos beforehand. So I will be talking about 6 books total here. And oh boy, do I got a lot of things to say, because in this video, I will be talking about probably 2 of the worst books I've absolutely read this entire year so far. But before we get further into the video, I would like to thank today's video sponsor, Book of the Month. So Book of the Month is a super fast and popular online growing book service for readers whose mission is to promote new and emerging authors to help readers discover the books they love. So every month they vet through hundreds of books to give readers a curated selection from their early release titles so they can spend less time researching and more time reading. We love to see it. So one of the best things about Book of the Month is their skip policy. If you're not vibing with that particular book within that particular month, you can skip that month anytime. It's literally risk-free. On the plus side, they have the best prices for early released hardcover fiction, meaning you can get your first book for only $9.99 with my code ellias. And with that being said, let's take a quick look at their September selections. First up, we have a romance, The Love Hypothesis. A rising scientist must decide if she's ready to experiment with love after a fake relationship generates real sparks. Next up, we have Beautiful Country, a moving memoir filtered through a child's eyes about a Chinese family struggling in the shadow of the American dream. Next up, we have contemporary fiction, The Sweetest Remedy. An unexpected loss leads a young woman on a soul-searching journey to reconnect with her Nigerian family and find herself. Next up, we have a thriller, Rock, Paper, Scissors. When a remote anniversary getaway turns eerie, a couple learns if their marriage can bear the weight of their secrets. Next up, we have a contemporary fiction, The Neighbor's Secret. A suburban book club discovers that life can be more disturbing than fiction when a vandal disrupts life on the cul-de-sac. Those are the selections for this month of September. Again, if you're interested in any of these titles, my link and code are in the description box down below. Thank you again to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. Alright, so with that being said, let's go straight into the wrap-up. So we're going to start off with the best books first, the feel-good ones, before we heavily descend into the god-awful books. First up being Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. You already know, 5 out of 5 fucking stars. This book was beautiful in its entirety. I made a whole dedicated video talking about this book. So this is one of the book picks for the Late Night Book Club, and I am so glad that I finally got to read it because this is one of the books where I've seen countless times. Pretty much everyone has read it. Pretty much everyone has loved it. So to that degree, I was already hesitant and wary going in. I was just really scared and just doubtful of this book in its entirety. Like, I was already 100% there on the bandwagon to dismiss and hate this book. Let me just tell you that this book is truly deserving all of the stars, all of the hype, all of the buildup that surrounds it, because I don't think I have read such a beautiful, tragic, romantic story in my entire life, and that truly says a lot. If you've been living under a rock and you don't know what this book is about, it's essentially a retelling of 2 of the main characters in the Iliad, mainly focusing on Achilles and Patroclus. And I think that majority of why people love it so much, I think gotta give it props. Gotta hand our hats off to Madeline Miller for just crafting such an extensive story about such a classic, powerful legend, this myth of the Iliad, and just bringing it on a human surface level where we all can resonate with. And it was such a beautiful thing to read. I could go on and talk about this book for days, but if you want to hear all of my thoughts, all of my feels and reactions to this book, I made a whole dedicated video to it, and I'll leave that somewhere on the screen so that you guys can definitely check it out. Because if I had to make a list of the top 5 books to read before you die, this would be on it. So there you go. Alright, so these next set of books you've definitely seen before because I made a whole reading vlog about it, so I will briefly go over the next 3 books and go full in depth for the last 2 books. First up, we have That Weekend by Cara Thomas. I think that for a YA thriller, this one really holds its ground. It's extremely strong. I also think that when it comes to a really good, solid YA thriller, Cara Thomas is one of the authors that's up there because I've pretty much read all of her YA thrillers so far, and yeah, there are a couple misses, not gonna lie, but most of them stand really well on their own, and this is no exception. In my opinion, this is probably the best one that she has written so far. For a YA thriller, it's pretty underrated. It's one of those really quiet, low-key thrillers that really take you by surprise, especially towards the end. So the story mainly follows these trio of friends who go on a weekend getaway trip in the mountains. Throughout this whole book, we follow this one main character trying to figure out what happened over the course of the weekend when she wakes up with no memory but covered in blood and her friends are missing. So it has a pretty simple and basic but intriguing premise. I think for me, for like the first half of the book, it really reads like a standard normal YA thriller. However, it's when the second half of the book where things really take a turn, where things take off, and I was here for it. So for the first half of the book, we're with these characters who are graduating seniors, graduating from high school. Later in the second half, we are following the main character who is a freshman in college. This one was definitely surprising, especially in its twist, because I thought I knew where things were going. I was like, oh yes, this is gonna be the twist, this is how it's gonna happen, this is how it's gonna end. Fortunately for me, there were actually a couple of other twists in here that managed to actually thoroughly surprise me. Gotta give this book credit for doing that to me. Take with it what you will, because I probably had lower expectations for this book going in, but honestly, it was a really great fun time. If you're looking for a solid dark YA thriller that's equally twisting and thrilling, definitely highly recommend. Alright, next up we have False Witness by Karin Slaughter. So if you guys weren't aware or had absolutely no idea, Karin Slaughter is one of my go-to authors when it comes to thriller books. There is just something extremely different on how she writes her thriller books compared to other thriller authors. I don't know if it's her characters, her story, her writing style, everything about it. She's just overall built different, and I truly love that for her. I have to say, most of her thrillers, if not all, are extremely character-heavy and character-driven books, because most of the time when you're reading most thriller books, you don't really expect layered or complicated stories or complex characters. You're just honestly there most of the time for the thrill. However, when it comes to Karin Slaughter, you get all of that and so much more. This is one of the first thriller books that I have read where I actually really cared for the characters and almost cried because it was just that heartbreaking and sad. I think out of all the thriller books that Karin has written, this is probably one of the least thrillery, in my opinion. I mean, don't get me wrong, it does contain the suspense, the mystery. However, it isn't as dark or devious as her other books, but that isn't saying that this book isn't light at all. This book is extremely dark. It deals with heavy themes and topics of sexual assault, abuse, drug use, and suicide. It's all there. Packs a heavy punch. Follow two sisters who have to work together again to solve a current mystery in their present life that sort of harkens back to a childhood tragic past. So I'm not going to give too much away, but this is one of the more sophisticated thrillers out there for me. It's very complex, very complicated, very layered, and very driven. So I would actually take caution. I mean, when it comes to Karin Slaughter in general, you're just going to have to slightly be more careful going in because her books are just that much more violent, more brutal, and just more visceral. Just something for you guys to think about, being more mindful going into her books. Alright, so the next book is The Burning Girls by C.J. Tudor. This one I had mixed feelings for. I feel like it started off very, very strong, but in the end fizzled out so poorly and so weakly. It was just overall really disappointing and underwhelming, to say the least. This one takes place in the UK and it follows a reverend mother and her daughter moving into a village with a mysterious dark past revolving around the murder and sacrifice of these burning girls. The premise itself was extremely intriguing. I do like a story where main characters are sort of isolated from the rest of the world. And this book was actually extremely atmospheric as well, so I've got to give it points to that. However, the twist for me for this book was just so abrupt, so out of left field, that it sort of had me reeling and just wondering why it was the twist. When it comes to thriller books, you're always wondering what the twist is, and it doesn't have to make sense to a certain degree. But I feel like in this case, I feel like the twist in this book was just there, just for the element of surprise. I mean, sure, we gotta suspend our belief sometimes in one way or another when it comes to thriller books, but most of the time it sort of ties in back with like a tragic childhood past in some relevant way or another to the character or the story overall. But I feel like the twist for me in this one didn't really make a whole lot of sense because in the end for me, it just raises a whole bunch of other questions and I had to go back and just question why this character did this when they interacted with this character. It was just overall really messy, very underwhelming, so just really disappointed overall. However, I still am interested in reading C.J. Tudor's other books in the future sometime, but The Burning Girls, man, just wasn't for me. 3 out of 5 stars. Alright, so we are coming to the end of this wrap up with our last 2 final books. These 2 books have already made it on the list of the worst books of 2021 for me. I'm pretty sure you already know what these books are, but first one up being The Maidens by Michaelitis. Alright, where do I even want to fucking start with this book? Alright, before we start, let me just give you the brief synopsis on what this whole book is about. So we follow our main character, our psychotherapist, who is reeling after the death of her husband. But one day, she gets a phone call from her niece saying that her best friend has been murdered at the school that a psychotherapist has also attended in the past. So said psychotherapist embarks on the journey to go to the school, and when she gets there, she gets embroiled up in this mystery of who exactly is murdering off all these women at this school. That is essentially the whole gist, the whole plot of this book. This psychotherapist taking it upon herself to figure out the mystery of her niece's best friend's death, trying to prove that this professor at the school is the murderer. First off, why does this psychotherapist, what is even her name? I forgot. Mariana. Her name is Mariana. Okay, why does Mariana... Alright, listen, I'm all for people just believing that they're the main characters of their own story and trying to figure out, who the murderer is. That's basically a simple hook, a plot line in most thrillers anyway. Trying to get clues, trying to prove that this person did A and B. However, in this case, it literally truly made 0 sense how Mariana got from point A to point B and how she even got there in the first place. So we have this random lady going to this prestigious, popular school where every man is sort of infatuated with her, and she finds herself coincidentally at these places where she's able to attain clues, and even in the end, with all of these clues, she still isn't able to discern who the serial killer is until they're literally right in front of her, brandishing a weapon and saying all these stupid things, and she's finding like, light bulb moment, you're the serial killer. It was honestly so fucking stupid how she even got there in the first place, and the twist for this book in general, the why, truly made 0 sense to me. It was so fucking stupid. I truly couldn't fathom how the author took it upon himself to actually thought that this was actually a decent twist. I think I was more shocked at the fact that I was right the entire time. Like in the beginning of the book, I called it out. I was like, there's no fucking way this twist is the twist, because if it was, it would be absurd. Like for an example, you're reading a thriller book, right? And you're like, of course, thinking about all the twists, all the certain outcomes that could, come to fruition, come to be at the end of the book. And some of the ideas that you have obviously are so outrageous. Like you're like, there's no way, right? It's like you think about it for 1 second and you're like, there's no way, that's fucking stupid. And you put it out of your mind and you continue reading with another great twist, obviously. This was the case for me in this book because when the character first popped up on the page, I was like, oh, it's you. And I was like, there's no fucking way. I was honestly more shocked at myself, like for guessing it right, than the actual reveal itself. I think this is truly one of the dumbest thrillers I have read. Actually, no, I'm gonna save that title for the next book I'm gonna talk about because that truly was something in of itself. But this one, the things that Mariana did to achieve certain clues or the people that she met with, the things that she said, you literally just gave yourself away. For example, if she suspected someone, she would ask them these stupid questions that would literally out her or put her in danger, for asking these questions to this person that she suspects. It literally never occurs to her. And the professor that she thinks is a serial killer, listen, he has these like group of women who follow him around on campus as like the maidens, these chosen ones. I feel like we're in 2021. It wouldn't fly if this young professor has a group of women trailing him in his class, acting like they're in high school, acting like they're a clique, they're the main characters in Mean Girls. So that was a thing. That just really made no sense to me. I think overall this is just a really bizarre, wild time. So 1 out of 5 stars for me, with all the character choices, the dialogue, the decision making between the main character and how she thinks she's the main character in her story, trying to figure out the murderer and the serial killer. So yeah, there you go. If you enjoyed it, good for you. I love that for you. However, for me, I'm just equally disappointed and just underwhelmed with this book in general, and probably won't be picking up any more books from this author in the future. So there you go. Alright guys, so we have come down to our last and final book in this wrap up, and probably the worst one yet. I didn't think anything could beat the Maidens at this point, but after reading and finishing this book, oh man, the feelings of just crushed disappointment, I truly tell you, was very strong with this one. This one will be so hard-hitting on so many levels just because I had such high hopes for this author, and this author was actually a recurring fave in reading thriller books. So if that didn't give it away, this is Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This book just truly defied the odds in every way for me, and not in a good way. Okay, so you should know that when it comes to Riley Sager, I've pretty much read all of his thriller books. I've given literally every single one of them 4 to 5 stars, listed quite a few of them as some of my favorite thrillers of all time. There are authors where I have literally loved every single book that they have written, and some authors where literally every single one of their books I've absolutely hated. Can't really say an author where I've actually loved and hated their books, but hey, Riley Sager, hats off to you. You truly earned this title from me, so you're welcome. This had a really great and interesting premise. Like, I was absolutely 100% here for the premise of this book. This book takes place in the 90s. It's about a college student who hitches a ride with a random stranger. However, she soon suspects that this guy that she barely knows going on this road trip home might be a serial killer. So of all thriller premises, it truly doesn't get better than that. Boy, was I dead fucking wrong. I was like, Riley, you wrote this? Are you sure you didn't have like a ghostwriter write it for you? Because it was just such a mess. Our main character, her name is Charlie. Charlie loves movies. Like, I kid you not, I don't think I've ever read or met anyone who has loved movies to such an extent as Charlie did. And hey, honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. One can have a massive love for anything. In this case, it was movies, and be cool about it, I mean, I have a massive love for books, as you can see. I'm pretty cool, I would like to assume. However, in this case, Charlie loves movies so much to a degree that she has sort of developed this illness where her mind would literally have a brain fart for like, I don't know, 5 minutes to 30 minutes, however long it takes. She has a spell where she would have a movie play in her mind and she literally can't do anything about it. She would just space off, daydream, brain fart, and just have a movie play in her mind and just come out of it and snap out of it. Basically, she would have these spells, okay? It was just so stupid to me how she would have these movie spells or have movies play in her mind because she watched and loved so many of them. Like, for example, her life would be in danger and then all of a sudden a movie would just randomly play in her mind just because. And she would be like, oh, fuck me, man. And I'm like, yeah, fuck you, you stupid hoe. It made no sense to me as to why she would have these movies play in her mind, even though there was an example, a concrete sort of explanation given, because, you know, mild spoilers here, but after the death of her parents in a car accident, she goes live with her grandmother, and there she, you know, finds solace in movies. You know, that I can't understand why. I can see why you would find comfort in that. However, she literally has no history of like mental illness or anything. Like, I don't even want to call it a mental illness. She literally has never had a spell before, but after the death of her parents and after watching so many fucking movies, all of a sudden her mind would just take her to a different place, somewhere else, and she literally has no control over it. She would just have these random movies just play in her mind. So if that wasn't random enough, she gets into a fucking random ass stranger's car. Charlie, our main character, who, after the death of her best friend at the hands of a serial killer, decides to go back home on a road trip to a random fucking stranger ass's car. I mean, Charlie, come on. Your best friend literally just died at the hands of a serial killer. You're just gonna decide. I think it's okay to go into a random guy's car for the next 8 hours on this road trip. It is truly astounding. Girl didn't even want to wait to go home with her boyfriend, like, in a week. Like, there is somewhat of an explanation given to us why she wanted to go home, like, so early. I was like, this is such a fucking cop-out. This is, like, truly a plot device, and I was not here for it. You know what? I'm gonna talk about this book. So if you are deciding to read this book, go for it. I mean, hey, you might have a grand fucking good time, but I honestly was, like, questioning the common sense this main character had, which was truly non-existent. So if you actually have read it and you truly love the book, I mean, I question your lack of common sense too, but hey, you know, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. So if you want to read this book, go for it. All right, with that being said, gonna dive into spoilers now. There's an instance in this book where Charlie realizes, or she thinks she realizes, that the person that she's sitting next to on this whole fucking road trip is a serial killer. And so they go to this diner, right? And she goes into the bathroom. However, at this point, she has another movie in her mind with her dead best friend, and this gives her an epiphany. She looks herself into the mirror, giving her this feminist moment where she was like, you know what? Fuck common sense. I'm literally gonna go back into this random stranger ass's car, and I know that he's a serial killer. I will make it my mission that I, Charlie, will stop him to make sure that he will no longer hurt another girl again, because I will put an end to it. She literally gives herself this monologue, and I was like, oh, I mean, when men try to add in that feminist aspect, you know, trying to make a feminist standpoint in their thrillers, half the time, it doesn't come off that way, like, at all. It truly comes off in, like, the worst way possible. Every value break by Peter Swanson. And so Charlie, our main heroine, the girl that we're rooting for, goes back into the car with this random guy who turns out isn't a serial killer after all. He's actually a bounty hunter who is tasked by the grandmother who is faking as a waitress at this diner because she wants to get answers from Charlie. She thinks Charlie has all the answers buried deep in her mind, and so she wants to kidnap Charlie after the death of her granddaughter to take Charlie to this random ass dark location so that she can torture all the information out of her. What the fuck? Yes, folks, this old lady, this grandmother, has kidnapped Charlie, was literally going to torture her for information, was posing as a fake waitress at this diner in the middle of fucking nowhere, and yet Charlie was able to be incapacitated by this grandma. I mean, wow. I mean, true, yeah, the grandma did have a gun, but I'm like, at some point, you literally could have escaped and gotten away and fought with this old lady who was literally half your size and weight in that matter. And the bounty hunter, oh my god, don't even get me started on him. He has like a change of heart at the end of the novel for kidnapping this girl, taking her to this random diner to this old lady. Anyways, shit goes down, he ends up in the hospital, and he and Charlie end up going on a date together. Yeah, so this bounty hunter, who Charlie for literally half the book thought he was a serial killer, thought he was fucking creepy, thought like the worst of him, in the end, she goes out with him and marries the dude. It's the Stockholm Syndrome for me, dude. Like, literally, for the majority of the book, she was, like, opting to get away from him so badly. Like, there are a majority of reasons why Charlie was uncomfortable with this dude. Like, why she thought he was a serial killer in the first place. I mean, the twist was, in the end, her boyfriend turned out to be a serial killer. I mean, overall, this whole book was just fucking messy as hell. There are so many aspects of this book that truly did not make any sense to me whatsoever. But will I ever read another book from Riley Sager? Hell fucking yeah, of course. I mean, just hopefully it'll be 10 times better than this book. I mean, it's truly one of the worst books I've read in 2021. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Please let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of these books, and if you have read these books, what did you guys think? I am curious to know if any of you guys felt similar to The Maidens or Survive the Nights. I mean, truly, this book, Survive the Night, the irony with this book, I truly barely survived the night reading this one. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you all soon with a new video. Alright, next up, we have false... Alright, next up, we have false... Oh my god. You know, because most of the time when you're reading a thriller book, you don't really, because most of the time when you're reading a thriller book, you're not, because most of the time when you're reading, not many, I can't really say that for a lot of authors, actually. You know, come to think of it, can't really say that. You know, come to think of it,